Tatiana Schlossberg, a relatively private figure, was thrown into an unanticipated whirlwind of controversy when remarks attributed to Donald Trump once again put the Kennedy family at the center of a national debate as online anger and political rhetoric grew. The Kennedy family is still one of the most well-known political families in the country, more than 60 years after John F. Kennedy took office. Many Americans still associate the name with sacrifice, idealism, public duty, and frequent tragedies. However, in the current political environment, conflict rather than introspection is often used to examine that legacy. Recent internet debates involving President Kennedy's granddaughter, Tatiana Schlossberg, and statements made by former President Donald Trump rekindled long-standing conflicts between populist criticism and political legacy. What started out on the internet as disjointed assertions and passionate conjecture swiftly developed into a more comprehensive political narrative. Incomplete or false information was magnified by social media users, commentators, and partisan voices, blurring the lines between reality and fiction. The digital environment made the problem worse rather than better, allowing fury to spread more quickly than confirmation. The incident left unanswered issues as the focus on Trump's comments and the Kennedy name progressively disappeared from the news. This was more than just a single political figure making controversial remarks or a well-known family being brought up once more. It revealed more profound rifts in contemporary American discourse, including how power is used, how inherited names are handled, and how readily spectacle can obscure the truth. The Kennedy name has held a complex place in American culture for many years. It represents both elite luxury and civic duty, and it has received equal amounts of praise and criticism. The family is a prime target for political propaganda because of this duality, particularly for individuals like Donald Trump, whose ascent has been fueled by confronting long-standing institutions and power structures. However, criticism presents ethical issues that transcend partisan disagreement when it veers from ideology into personal mockery, especially when false information is involved. The vulnerability of factual correctness in the digital age was also brought to light by this incident. Once a rumor enters an algorithm-driven ecosystem, it can quickly become a perceived national controversy. Reputational harm might already be done by the time clarifications or corrections are made. The effects are tangible, they have an impact on actual people and skew public perception. Trump has always depended on confrontation in his political style. Critics see it as careless and degrading, while supporters see it as courage and honesty. This instance showed that such discourse is not isolated. Influential people's words can have far-reaching effects, particularly when they are aimed at people who are not actively engaged in political conflict. It becomes quite difficult to distinguish between mocking people and criticizing those in positions of authority. For Tatiana Schlossberg, whose career has been centered on environmental journalism rather than political rivalry, the incident highlighted an unsettling fact. A well-known last name may turn into an undesirable burden. People who are related to historical families may lose control over how their lives are portrayed in a time when identity is frequently reduced to symbolism. This brings up challenging issues of justice and individual liberty in public discourse. Equal attention should be paid to the media's role. Context, confirmation, and moderation are necessary for responsible journalism. When media outlets put speed, engagement, and emotional effect ahead of veracity, they fuel a vicious cycle where false information proliferates and public confidence declines. Sensationalism can draw attention in the short term, but it can also seriously damage one's credibility over time. More broadly, the dispute illustrates the unsettling normalization of mockery in politics. Although satire and criticism have always existed in democracies, the tone of national discourse has changed due to the growing dependence on personal scorn, which is frequently unrelated to policy. This strategy exacerbates conflict, encourages skepticism, and diverts attention from important problems that require group action. The public's response was equally important. Through sharing, discussing, and responding, audiences increasingly actively build narratives rather than being passive receivers of information. The issue is exacerbated by disseminating unsubstantiated accusations, reacting emotionally before verifying the facts, and interacting with content intended to incite rage. Restraint and media literacy are becoming crucial civic duties. Fundamentally, the experience was a reminder that both influence and discipline are necessary for leadership. It is possible to be critical without being harsh. Passionate debate doesn't have to be dehumanizing. The democratic ideals it purports to uphold run the risk of being compromised when authority is used without accountability. Ultimately, this moment will probably be remembered more for what it indicated about the current state of American debate than for any particular remark. It demonstrated how easily stories can be twisted, how fast people can become symbols, and how urgently society needs fresh commitments to truth, empathy, and accountability. If there is a lesson to be learned, it is that political or personal legacies should be honestly examined rather than exploited. In a time of fast communication, choosing compassion over harshness is a sign of leadership, not weakness. Tatiana Schlossberg. A synopsis. Tatiana Schlossberg is the daughter of Edwin Schlossberg, a member of the extended Kennedy family and the granddaughter of President John F. Kennedy. She has mostly stayed out of the spotlight, in contrast to many individuals connected to political dynasties. Her professional identity is based on environmental journalism and writing, with an emphasis on sustainability, conservation, and climate change. The focus on her family name contrasts with her quiet, research-focused job. However, in the current media environment, even people who want seclusion may find themselves embroiled in scandal, especially when political tensions are high. How the debate gained impact online posts that connected Schlossberg's name to more general Kennedy family narratives caused the issue to worsen. Certain assertions were wholly untrue, while others misrepresented facts and exaggerated events. Strong emotional responses were sparked by the ensuing uncertainty in social media and political contexts. Donald Trump made generic but strong remarks about the Kennedy legacy during this time of increased sensitivity. Even though he didn't specifically address Schlossberg, his more general remarks were frequently taken as derisive, especially in light of the circumstances. Opponents saw the comments as unduly personal, while supporters framed them as critique of inherited power. A persistent conflict with the Kennedy name. This episode was preceded by Trump's tense relationship with political dynasties. He has attacked families like the Kennedys, Bushes, and Clintons throughout his political career, claiming that inherited power erodes responsibility and merit. His supporters find resonance in these arguments because they perceive them as challenges to established elites. Others, however, believe that they disregard human complexity and historical context, especially when discourse veers from policy criticism to a personal tone. Ridicule versus criticism. The main point of contention surrounding this episode is delivery rather than just content. A key component of democracy is political criticism. Ridicule is much more controversial, particularly when it is directed at specific people and is unrelated to policy. Even in the absence of direct allegations, observers observed that Trump's rhetorical style, characterized by sarcasm, hyperbole, and branding, often amplifies injury. Critics contend that in this instance, he did not make a distinction between assessing a political legacy and going after people who had not pursued political power. False information and digital enhancement. The rapid dissemination of inaccurate or misleading information was one of the controversy's most detrimental aspects. Emotionally charged stories dominated headlines and timelines before fact-checkers could step in. This tendency is indicative of a larger problem in American public life. Disinformation has evolved into a means of inciting indignation. Even vague comments, regardless of their veracity, can be reframed into perceived attacks in such a setting. Accountability and ethics in the media news outlets were criticized for exaggerating the conflict without providing enough background. Clarity was given priority by some publications, while engagement was the focus of others. Media ethicists contend that journalists, platforms, and influencers who shape narratives are likewise accountable, in addition to public personalities. Although the Kennedy family's measured response was seen by some as evasion and by others as dignity, it highlighted the disparity between those who incite indignation and those who must put up with it. Divergent public opinion. The public's reaction was predictable. Trump's supporters said that no family should be exempt from criticism. He was accused by detractors of being opportunistic and insensitive. The speed at which unsubstantiated charges turned into national discussions worried moderates. As usual, social media sites turned into venues for divisive viewpoints, with attention shifting as quickly as it came. Today's Kennedy legacy. The dispute also brought up the question of whether the Kennedy name is still relevant in contemporary America. It brings back thoughts of idealism and public duty for earlier generations. It may represent hereditary privilege or historical legend to younger audiences. Tatiana Schlossberg embodies a more subdued development of that tradition through her environmental work, emphasizing global responsibility over political power. Her participation in the dispute serves as an example of how challenging it is to distinguish between family symbolism and personal identification. Using controversy as a political tactic, controversy has long been a tactical advantage for Donald Trump. Every confrontation strengthens his reputation as a disruptor who questions accepted conventions. Regardless of the content, political experts observe that using well-known names maintains him at the center of cultural discourse. Critics caution that by emphasizing show over content, this strategy undermines civic standards. The price of political jokes. Political jokes have more serious repercussions in the digital age. Words are rapidly transmitted, devoid of subtlety, and amplified by algorithms that are intended to incite indignation. People who have never sought political strife may suffer greatly on an emotional level, and public trust is still declining. The episode's teachings. There are various lessons to be learned from this controversy. There is actual harm caused by misinformation. Beyond purpose, political rhetoric has repercussions. Well-known families are nevertheless human. In today's digital world, media literacy is crucial. The tale serves as a warning about how quickly stories may go out of control and how hard it is to restore the truth once passion takes over. Final thoughts. Beyond the sound. In the end, this was about more than just the Kennedy family or Donald Trump. It demonstrated how America manages legacy, truth, and power in a time of perpetual connectivity. Although it may draw attention, mockery rarely results in comprehension. Moments like this force society to reevaluate what type of leadership and what sort of dialogue it is willing to allow as public discourse becomes more adversarial. Tatiana Schlossberg is still fundamentally a private person with a well-known name. Donald Trump continues to be a divisive character whose remarks demand attention. The media ecology that exists between them is constantly forced to decide between educating and inciting. More than any one comment, that decision could influence the direction of American political culture.